Progressive reformers saw the country and its people as a major target for modernization, and education was its main weapon. 7 forward-looking Filipinas came together in 1919 to create a school where young women could gain the knowledge and skills that would make them modern women. Paz Marquez Benitez was the first president of the Philippine Women's College. Jose Abad Santos was its first chairman of the Board of Trustees. Francisca Tirona Benitez was the second president, and with her husband Dean Conrado, guided the school from a house on A. Flores Street to its iconic Taft Avenue campus. In 1932, the college became a university, making PWU the first university for women in Asia founded by Asians. It provided a space where innovations in education flourished, and young people were encouraged to be the best that they could be. For over 100 years, the Philippine Women's University has been known as a leader in quality education. In 1934, PWU moved into its main campus on Taft Avenue, and since the 1970s has been co-educational. Located in the heart of Metro Manila, it is easily accessible by public transport and surrounded by affordable housing. Today's PWU offers undergraduate and graduate courses in several fields of study. Its business and management programs are responsive to the needs of industry, using evolving technology for global competence. PWU graduates excel in arts and sciences, education, social work, and diplomacy. Its fine arts and music programs have produced outstanding graduates through a holistic education that treasures heritage as well as excellence. PWU has pioneered in fields such as food science, nutrition and dietetics, medical technology, pharmacy, and nursing. PWU continues to play an essential role in producing graduates who possess the skills that make them competitive in the country and anywhere in the world. Philippine Women's University has helped its graduates evolve individually and collectively, developing competencies in the classroom and enhancing the curriculum with a wealth of educational experiences and interactions. PWU defines success through graduates able to measure up to the traditional standards of education, while imbued with the values of personal integrity and spirituality, family solidarity, and community participation. Join us as PWU honors its past century of achievement while moving ever forward to its next 100 years.
Thank you to our frontliners for being our modern heroes. We appreciate your sacrifices.
Our dear frontliners, thank you for having a brave heart, kind heart, and caring heart. God bless you all.
Dear frontliners, thank you for doing your best to take care of our country. Thank you for being such a nice person to us. I hope you guys are safe and thank you for always helping us. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, frontliners. Keep safe. God bless. Bye. For caring us, I love you. I always pray for you. Dear Dr. Bastos, thank you for taking care of us. I love you.
Good afternoon to all the National Council of Women of the Philippines, the Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines, in partnership with the Philippine Women's University, welcome you all to our forum, Bawal and Bastos, an intriguing title to what promises to be a lively and engaging afternoon as we tackle the issues on the Safe Spaces Act, or the Republic Act 11313. This is Olivia Villafuerte and I will be your host this afternoon. But before we proceed, allow me to give you some gentle reminders, please. In observance, the proper observance of Zoom etiquette, and to allow a clear transmission of our program, we ask that you please set your microphones on mute and turn off your cameras throughout the program until you're invited to speak. Then you may unmute your mic and turn on your cameras. Thank you. To begin today's program, let us listen to a doxology to be offered by Nina Krista May Caro, National Council member, YWCA of the Philippines, and three-time champion of Tawag ng Tanghalan, to be followed by the Lupang Hinirang, featuring an all-women cast.
I'm so blessed, my Lord, I can see you. And all the lovely things so fine and true. I see you in the beauty of the flowers and the rain. I see you between the lines of a sweet refrain. I'm so blessed, my Lord, I can see you. Even when I'm lonely and in pain, I see you in the beauty of the stars at night. I see you in my life, I feel alright. I see you, Lord, in sorrow and in happiness. I see you in the glory of sweet success. I see you, Lord, every hour, every day. I can see you, Lord, whenever I pray. I'm so blessed, my Lord, I can see you in the smile of a baby, sweet and true. I can see you in the eyes of my very best friends. I see you in these bonds, just like your love that never ends. I see you, Lord, in sorrow and in happiness. the glory of sweet success. I see you, Lord, every hour, every day. I can see you, Lord, whenever I pray. I see you, Lord, in sorrow and in happiness. I see you in the glory of sweet success. I see you, Lord, every hour, every day. I can see you, Lord, whenever I pray. I pray. I can see you, Lord, whenever I pray. I see you, Lord.
Tumayo po tayong lahat at sabay-sabay nating awitin ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Ayang pag-ibig, pero sa silanganan, hanap ng puso, sa dilim mo'y buhay. Lupang hihirang, gulatan ng pag-ibig, sa manlulupin, ikaw nasisingil, sa lahat ng lubog, sa singer at sa lalim mong baba, may ginagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isang ng patawad mo'y talumpay na nagniligid,
To open our program, may we invite Mrs. Bicomong to deliver her opening remarks. Ms. Bicomong, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Are there gentlemen in the audience? I could not see. I'm so sorry. Well, it's always heartening to see some of the most empowered people gathering like this. I think that we are all going to enjoy ourselves on this forum because new things are going to be discussed, and anything at all that will be new is something to learn. But before all that, on behalf of the three proponents of this afternoon's forum, I want to welcome each and every one of you and say, stay put in your seats and relax, because there are many things that we are going to discuss to make it a lively forum. The Safe Places Act has been enacted by the government, otherwise known as Republic Act 11313, close on the heels of the Magna Carta of the Philippines, which is Republic Act 9710. Now we know that the Magna Carta has got very strong legs to stand on. The Magna Carta was enacted back 2010, all hoping that this is something that will continue on, although there were not corresponding punishments for those who were violating laws that are not supposed to be violated. Now that we have the 11313, we are all encouraged to even be more empowered, despite anything in our lives, despite gender, despite religion, despite social standing. We are all in this together. So again, sit back and relax. We will all learn a lot from our speakers this afternoon, and we are all looking forward to a very interesting interaction with our speakers. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Madame Bicomong. And now we have very special people with us here today. And to recognize and acknowledge them, we will ask Ms. Nerissa Liana, Chairperson, Special Project Committee of the NCWP and National Executive Director, YWCA, to recognize and acknowledge these very special persons. Ms. Narisa.
Thank you, Professor Olive. Good afternoon to all. Truly, we are delighted to have this online forum. We have initially thought of this as a face-to-face gathering. However, despite of all the challenges, it did not dampen our spirit to proceed with this, but now on a different platform. All glory to God. As chairperson of the Special Projects Committee, it is my honor to present the participants and guests of this forum. I would like to recognize, first of all, the President of the National Council of Women of the Philippines, Mr. Sita Tess Gonzalez, PWU President, Mr. Marco Alfredo Benitez, YWCF the Philippines and NCWP immediate past President, Dr. Lunida Bayani Ortiz. Our guest resource person will be properly introduced later, but I would like to acknowledge Dr. Sylvia E. Claudio, Dean College of Social Work and Community Development, who is with us right now in the Zoom room. Of course, the rest are Attorney Clara Rita A. Padilla from Engender Rights and Philippine Commission on Women Chairperson, Commissioner Sandy S. Montano. The officers and members of the Board of Trustees of NCWP, Executive Vice President Nina Lutgarda Tanwatco, also from Tanay Ladies Association. We have Dr. Cecil D. from Kawayan Ladies in the province of Isabela, Green Ladies Association. She is the Vice President for Luzon. We have the Secretary, Aurora M. De Leon, who is from Imus Institute of Science and Technology. Treasurer, Attorney Alicia Rizos Vidal, President of the Women Lawyers Association of the Philippines. We would like to also acknowledge a representative from the Catholic Women's League, the President, Dr. Rosa Rita Mariano, one of the Institutional Director of NCWP. From the Girl Scouts of the Philippines, headed by National President Susan Locsin. Of course, we have the Philippine Federation of Business and Professional Women with us, headed by Dr. Nona Ricafort. From the YWCA of the Philippines, we have our National Treasurer, Sunny Beth Gracela, and of course, Ma'am Remy Bicomong, whom you earlier heard. We have representative from the YWCA from Baguio, Makati, Marikina, Dagupan, San Pablo City, Laguna, San Jose del Monte, Bulacan, Quezon City, NCWP affiliates from Philconsa, Balikatan sa Kaunlaran. We have also from PWCTU. And of course, we would like to acknowledge also the technical teams from the Philippine Women's University, Sir Bob and the gang, of course, May and Ms. Maha, and the National YWCA staff. For our participants this afternoon, we were so overwhelmed with the registration, the turnout of the registration. It turned out 312, but we can only accommodate up to 100. Some are in the waiting room, we don't know, but they're not in the list of the confirmed participants. But I hope they would just proceed to the Facebook Live. We have a big group from DepEd Quezon City, representing various elementary and high school. We have participants from PAGCOR, University of the Philippines, United Nations Association of the Philippines, City Social Welfare Office, Bacoor, Cavite, PUP, PNA, IRIS, Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila, Cavite State University, LGU, Quezon Province, University of Santo Tomas, Alliance of Concerned Teachers, Philippine Christian University, Manila Law College, University of the East, Asian Social Institute, New Era University, University of the Rizal System, and the Department of Social Welfare and Development. Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, due to the limitation of our Zoom account, we could not accommodate all of you, but please watch Facebook Live of NCWP, YWCA, and PWU. And I believe this is also being streamed in some account of PWU in YouTube and Instagram. But don't forget to like these pages. Maraming salamat po, and may God be the glory.
Thank you, Ms. Liana, and a warm welcome to all of you here who have joined us this very warm afternoon. To go on with the program, the Philippine Women's University, an institutional member of the NCWP, has been a partner in various projects, including today's forum. We would like to invite Mr. Marco Alfredo Benitez, University President of the Philippine Women's University, for his words of greeting. Mr. President, please.
Ms. Tess Gonzalez, NCWP President, Ms. Lilia Farinas, YWCA President, distinguished speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Before anything else, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum, the National Council of Women of the Philippines and the Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines, for providing a venue to discuss this landmark legislation, Republic Act number 11313, or the Safe Spaces Act. Why is the Safe Spaces Act so important? To live in freedom and safety is a basic human right. As the name suggests, the Safe Spaces Act upholds this tenet by protecting every individual's right to a safe and inviolable space, whether it be physical or virtual in nature. What makes it so insignificant is that this law marks a consequential shift away from the machismo culture that Filipino women have had to contend with for as long as we can remember. Catcalling, wolf whistling, sexual slurs, obscene gestures, and unwanted comments, actions that were previously normalized by society and considered par for the course, are now recognized by law as acts of violence. It sends a clear message: Bawal ang Bastos. By acknowledging these acts as forms of harassment and criminalizing them, every Filipino of all genders is empowered with the lawful means to act against those who violate their basic right to live freely and in safety. Educating the public about this has become even more urgent in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis. As a result of the pandemic, women, girls, and the LGBTQ+ community face increased vulnerability to gender-based violence. For instance, victims of domestic abuse have less access to shelters and other support systems due to restrictions in mobility. Lack of public transportation under quarantine leaves women with no recourse but to walk or bike in dark, less populated streets, making them easier targets for predators. There are documented reports of sexual harassment in government checkpoints as women and the LGBTQ+ are subjected to physical screenings often conducted by male personnel. Online gender-based aggression is also on the rise as more and more of our daily activities are conducted in the virtual spaces. PWU and NCWP both stand in the same foundation laid by civic leader and educator Francisca Tirona Benitez, who championed the Filipino woman's right to equal participation in nation building. As an institution built on the pillars of gender equality and empowerment through education, PWU eagerly embraces its role in raising public awareness about this issue. We believe that it is our responsibility to support endeavors such as this forum, where we can come together to learn from each other and to discuss how we can shape our culture in a way that empowers the underrepresented and has zero tolerance for gender-based violence of any kind. So congratulations to the NCWP and YWCA for what will surely be an enlightening and successful forum. Thank you to all the participants for your presence today. I look forward to learning from your rich and lively discussions. Stay safe and God bless.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now, we would like to invite Ms. Lilia Farinas, President, YWCA of the Philippines, to deliver her greetings. Ma'am Farinas, please.
A beautiful and blessed afternoon to everyone. In spite of the COVID-19 pandemic, we still are very blessed to be alive and well, and it is indeed still a beautiful world. Before anything, I would like to thank the National Council of Women of the Philippines, headed by its President, Madam Teresita Tess Gonzalez, Ms. Sandy S. Montano, Chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Women, professors from the University of the Philippines, Dr. Silvia Claudio, Dean College of Social Work and Community Development, and Dr. Natalie A. Berceles, Center for Women's and Gender Studies. Also from the University of the Philippines, Mr. Marco Alfredo N. Benitez of the Philippine Women's University, Professor Olive M. Villafuerte, Ms. Remy Bicomong, Chairperson of the Global and Local Affairs Committee, Dr. Leonida Bayani Ortiz, Past President, NCWP and YWCA of the Philippines, and Madam Neri Liana, YWCA National Executive Director and Chairperson of the Social or Special Projects Committee on NCWP, members of the committees, and all our participants and guests of this online forum who believe in the empowerment of women. A pleasant afternoon to all. Galatians chapter 3 verse 28 says, "There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." The Apostle Paul spoke of non-discrimination based on gender, and thus making our topic for today both timely and relevant. The Philippines has always been a prime mover, especially in Southeast Asia, for legislations that protect women and the girl child. However, in spite of these accomplishments, we continue to hear of the discrimination and violation of women in various forms, be them physical, verbal, emotional, or psychological. In Republic Act 11313, it was signed into law just last April 17 of this year, and the Safe Space Act has taken effect this August. Bawal na po ang bastos sa ating mga kalye, sa lansangan, sa ating mga pinagtatrabahuan, eskwelahan, at pati na rin po sa social media. I would like to take this opportunity to thank and commend Senator Risa Hontiveros, Chairperson of the Senate Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, principal sponsor and author of this landmark legislation, for having valiantly championing its approval. Mabuhay po kayo, Senator. Indeed, this piece of legislation will reflect or replace a culture of vulgarity and violence of the Filipino nation into a new and positive culture among Filipinos, especially our children, not only in physical spaces but also in virtual spaces online. Acts such as sexual harassments, staring, stalking, catcalling, or taunting on the basis of one's gender are punishable by law and can warrant fines of up to 20,000 pesos. Dahil dito po, mababago na ang dating pag-uugali at paggamit ng ating lingwahe sa ating mga kababaihan at pati na rin po sa ating mga LGBT na ating mga kapatid. As a councilor of Baguio City, we will endeavor to incorporate and infuse the provisions of RA 11313 into our local ordinances, particularly our revised 2020 Gender and Development and Children's Code, the establishment of the Bawsi desk in every barangay of Baguio, and also in the Anti-Profanity Ordinance, which I am both proudly and humbly the author. With the Safe Spaces Act, harassment on the basis of gender orientation will no longer be confined to moral ascendancy in accordance to the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act, where sexual harassment may only be committed by a person having authority or influence over another. Now, sexual harassment shall already be punishable even outside the workplace, whether online or in person. Finally, I would like to congratulate every Filipina woman, young, adult, and child. We are now even more protected by the law against violence and discrimination. We are now truly empowered by the law against violence, as much as we used to be. We recognize the efforts of the National Council of Women of the Philippines, together with its affiliates, the Philippine Women's University, and the University of the Philippines, and the different local associations of the Young Women's Christian Association, and all our partners in this endeavor, with the end in view of educating women and the community, and how we can collaborate towards making our society a better, a brighter, a safer place for women and girls to coexist just how God wanted us to be. This may be a giant leap for womankind, but this will not mean that we will let our guards down just yet. The sad reality of violence against women and children still persists in our society. Let us be vigilant evermore. Our fight against violence against women and children and all acts of sexual harassments will continue relentlessly and without let up. Mabuhay po ang mga kababaihan, mabuhay po tayong lahat, and God bless us all. Maraming salamat po.
Salamat po at mabuhay ang kababaihan. And now to complete the trilogy of partnership, let us listen to some inspiring words from Mrs. Teresita T. Gonzalez, President of the NCWP. Madam.
YWCA National President Leia Farinas, PWU President Marco Benitez, NCWP Past President Baby Ortiz, PCW Chairperson Sandy Montano, Dr. Sylvia Claudio, Attorney Clara Rita Padilla, GSP, President Susan Locsin, CWL National President Dr. Rita Mariano, Philippine Business and Professional Women's President Nona Ricafort, officers, and members of the Board of Trustees of the National Council of Women of the Philippines, friends and participants, good afternoon. The Philippines has accomplished so much in closing the gender gap in the country. Over the past 7 years, we have consistently been counted among the top 10 countries in the Global Gender Gap Index from among 145 countries worldwide. In 2013, our best year so far, we were ranked number 5. In 2018, we were at number 8. It was not until this year that we fell to the 16th place globally. Still, in the East Asia and Pacific region, we are second only to New Zealand. Our fall to the 16th place in 2020 is largely because of our political empowerment sub-index. There are less women legislators now than in 2018, at only 28% of both houses, and even lesser women in the cabinet and ministerial positions, from 25% in 2018 down to just 10% today. However, in terms of the economic participation and opportunity sub-index, we have closed the gender gap by 80%. There are more women than men in senior and leadership roles, as well as in the professional and technical professions. We are one of only 4 countries to attain this feat so far. That said, there is a greater need to protect women as they leave their homes and join the workforce. This is what the Safe Spaces Act aims to provide us women. For how many times have we had to bite our tongues as we listen to our male bosses and office peers make inappropriate comments about how we look? Or how many times have we had to drown out that revolting feeling inside us when they deliberately press their body or parts of it against ours? And how many times have we nervously walked down a street, an alley, or a hallway, sensing some guy stare down at us as if to undress us? This is a reality that every woman has experienced at some point in her life. This is what the act hopes to put an end to. This afternoon, we will learn about how we are now protected in the workplace, in school, in public places, on the streets, in restaurants, and everywhere we go. We will understand the role of our government units, our employers, bosses, and peers in making this happen. We will see how we can seek redress when we feel we have been wronged. The mechanisms for lodging complaints against our offenders are in place. It is important that we note the requisites to filing our complaints, as we never know when we will fall prey to such offenders. It is equally important that we have confidence in ourselves and in these mechanisms for it to work. In closing, let me leave you with this thought so aptly put by Irish philosopher and statesman Edmund Burke. All that is needed for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. The Safe Spaces Act provides the framework for the protection of women at home, at our workplace, in public places, and everywhere we might find ourselves in. But each of us has a role to play in ensuring that this law is properly implemented. Let us look beyond ourselves and look out for each other, no matter where we are.
Thank you, President Benitez, President Fariñas, and President Gonzalez for your words of greeting. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the pièce de résistance. To introduce our panel of speakers, may we invite Ms. Lina Lutgarda M. Tanhuatco, Executive Vice President of NCWP, to do the honors. Madam Lina.
Thank you, Dean Olive. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our resource speaker, who is going to talk to us about RA 11313, known as the Safe Spaces Act. Our resource speaker, Attorney Claire Padilla, is the founder and executive director of End Gender Rights. She has been practicing law for over 26 years, prosecuting perpetrators of violations of women and LGBTQA persons' rights. She is known in the Philippines and internationally, working in the field of gender, gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and diverse sexual orientation and gender identities. She has worked in the Philippines and in New York as an international visiting legal fellow at the Center for Reproductive Rights, Survivors of Gender-Based Violence and Abuse in 2012, and she co-drafted the Quezon City Gender Fair Ordinance, prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, known as SOGI, passed in 2014. She was also one of the drafters of the DOH AO 2016-0041 on prevention and management of abortion complications. She won several Supreme Court en banc cases, including the 2010 landmark case of Anladlad versus Comelec, the constitutionality of the RH law, and the labor doctrine case Pioneer Texturizing Corporation versus NLRC and Lourdes de Jesus. She spearheaded the submission of the request for inquiry on reproductive rights violation to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW Committee, where the committee conducted historical second inquiry under the optional protocol to CEDAW. She has made oral interventions before the CEDAW Committee in New York in 2006, in Geneva in 2016 and 2018, before the Human Rights Council in Geneva in 2008. She was one of the panelists who presented before the CEDAW Committee in Geneva as a follow-up to the reproductive rights inquiry on Philippine reproductive rights violation, and before officers of the World Health Organization in Geneva in 2018. Feminist and human rights lawyer. She has written various trailblazing books, articles, papers, protocols, primers, and submissions, such as and Gender Rights publications on safe and legal abortion and rape, to name a few. She co-wrote the Outright Action International and Gender Rights publication entitled Protocol to Address Domestic Violence and Family Violence Experienced by Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Intersex persons in the Philippines. She has been conducting trainings and panel discussions and speaking engagement in different parts of the Philippines and around the world, catering to both state and government agencies. She was staffed as consultant by notable government leaders and offices, such as the late Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago and Quezon City Mayor Joy Belmonte, and many more. In recognition of her work on SOGI, she received an award from the Quezon City Pride Council and the Purple Feather from the Order of El Red. She holds a Juris Doctor degree from the Ateneo de Manila Law School in 1993 and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication from UP Liman 1988. Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen to Attorney Clara Rita Padilla.
So my topic is on RA 11313, or the Safe Spaces Act. It actually pertains to gender-based sexual harassment. Okay, so before I tackle the Safe Spaces Act, I'd like to talk about prior to the enactment of the Safe Spaces Act, there was already a Quezon City Garden Code, a revision of that ordinance in 2016, which actually is the basis partly of the Safe Spaces Act. So this particular ordinance tackles sexual harassment of women in public spaces, street-level sexual harassment, such as light violations, cursing, wolf whistling, catcalling, etc. And then medium violations such as stalking, and then severe violations including touching, pinching, and even masturbation. Okay, so under the Safe Spaces Act, which was enacted in 2018, it prohibits gender-based sexual harassment in the streets, public places, online, workplaces, and educational and training institutions. So all of these are mentioned in the law itself as the public places where gender-based sexual harassment can happen. The penalties are from light to severe, which can be from community service to up to 6 months imprisonment, or fine from 10,000 to 50,000, except for online violations, which has specific penalties. So briefly, the Safe Spaces Act would cover generally unwanted comments, gestures, and actions forced on a person in a public space without their consent, and is directed at them because of their actual or perceived sex, gender, gender expression, or sexual orientation and gender identity. So the public spaces, as outlined in the law and in the IRR, would cover streets, alleys, public parks, schools, government buildings, malls, bars, restaurants, transportation terminals, public markets, and public utility vehicles. So I call this the first degree offenses. You would have cursing, catcalling, wolf whistling, leering, intrusive gazing, taunting, unwanted invitations, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, sexist slurs, persistent unwanted comments on one's appearance, relentless requests for personal details such as name, contact, and social media details or destination, use of words, gestures, or actions that ridicule on the basis of sex, gender, or sexual orientation, and then identity and or expression, including sexist, homophobic, transphobic statement and slurs, persistent telling of sexual jokes, use of sexual names, comments, and demands. Any statement that has made an invitation on a person's sense of personal safety. This would prescribe in 1 year. And here you will see from the first offense, there is a second offense, third offense with higher penalties for the third offense. And I call this the second degree offense, as you have making offensive body gestures at someone, public masturbation, flashing of private parts, grouping, similar lewd acts, and this prescribes in 3 years. So this one also has first to second to third offenses with higher penalties than the first degree offenses. Then the third degree offenses also has higher penalties as compared to the first and second degrees from first to third offenses. So you have cases such as stalking, sexual advances, gestures, and statements mentioned previously with pinching and brushing against the body of the offended person, touching, pinching, or brushing against the genitalia, face, arms, anus, groin, breast, inner thighs, buttocks, or any part of the victim's body. This one prescribes in 10 years. Now, there are online sexual harassment punished under the Safe Spaces Act, and this would include terrorizing, intimidating victims through physical, psychological, and emotional threats, unwanted sexual, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist remarks and comments online, whether publicly or through direct or private messages, invasion of privacy through cyber stalking and incessant messaging, uploading and sharing of any form of media that contains photos, voice, or video with sexual consent without the consent of the victim. So unauthorized recording and sharing of any victim's photos, videos, or any informal information online, impersonating identities of victims online or posting lies about victims to harm their reputation, filing false abuse reports to online platforms to silence victims. The penalties are higher, 2 years, 4 months, up to a year to 4 years and 2 months, or a fine from 100,000 to 500,000. This one, it has no prescription. However, I do not agree with no imprescriptibility because I feel that this could be a subject of harassment as well. So to me, there should be some kind of prescription. As what happened with Maria Ressa, I do not believe that there should be liable for writers and reporters. Okay. So the Safe Spaces Act would include gender-based sexual harassment in the education and training institutions. So schools, whether public or private, shall designate an officer in charge to receive complaints. In number 2, every school must adopt and publish grievance procedures to facilitate the filing of complaints by students and faculty members. And then just to show you here, under number 3, even if the individual does not want to file a complaint or does not request that the school take any action on behalf of the student or the faculty, and the school authorities have knowledge or reasonably know about the possible or impending act of gender-based sexual harassment or sexual violence, the school should promptly investigate and take appropriate steps to resolve the situation. And number 4, if the school knows or reasonably should know about acts of gender-based sexual harassment or sexual violence being committed that creates a hostile environment, the school must take immediate action to eliminate the same acts, prevent their recurrence, and address their effects. And if the perpetrator is found guilty, the school may strip the diploma from the perpetrator or expel the student. There must be, number 6, a committee on decorum and investigation to address all forms of gender-based sexual harassment and even online sexual harassment. Educational or training-based sexual harassment prescribes in 5 years. Now, there's a duty of the school heads to disseminate or post a copy of the law and to prevent gender-based sexual harassment happening in the schools, including information campaigns. And then other duties of the school heads would be to create the CODI, which should be representative from the school administration, trainers, instructors, professors, coaches, students, trainees, students, and even parents. The CODI should have a head who is a woman, and half of its members should be women. But we're saying, of course, that not all women are gender sensitive or responsive. So these women should be, the given should be that they should be gender sensitive and gender responsive. So there should be equal representation of persons of diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So this would be, for example, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer people who should be members of the CODI as well. And of course, the members should be impartial and not connected or related to the alleged perpetrator. And then the liability of school heads would be for principals, school heads, teachers, instructors, professors, coach, trainers, or any other person who has authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another in the educational or training institution. They may be held responsible for non-implementation of their duties mentioned earlier and failure to act on reported acts. So you have the corresponding fines. And then under a court order, the victim can actually seek for a restraining order. So the perpetrator may be ordered to stay away from the offended person at a distance from the residence, school, place of employment, or any specified place frequented by the offended person. And then, of course, gender-based sexual harassment would cover sexual harassment in the workplace. This prescribes in 5 years. And just to differentiate, this law clearly points out that gender-based sexual harassment may happen between peers. It may be committed by a subordinate, by a student, by a trainee. Previously, under the RA 7877 or under the anti-sexual harassment law, and I was one of those who advocated for the law, except, of course, it's not a perfect law. Although we mentioned that sexual harassers can also be co-workers, unfortunately, some people misinterpret the law by thinking that peers, subordinates cannot be made liable under the said law, but they could be made liable as long as you're able to prove the sexual harassment. But this law clarifies any kind of misinterpretation. Okay, so my last slide is on to do. So for example, if there's a homeroom teacher and the homeroom teacher has extensive roles, duties, and interaction with the students, and this has been found in certain schools. So we should make it a fact that we should be able to delimit the roles of such homeroom school teacher. And of course, we should raise awareness of gender-based sexual harassment in school, online, and raise awareness on the liability. We should reach out to peers, guidance counselors, and create online even sexual harassment help page, raise awareness on the liability, referral, encourage complaints, and even messenger communication. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Padilla. Our next resource speaker who will talk to us on understanding the culture of violence and perception on women, Dr. Sylvia Estrada Claudio is the Dean of the College of Social Work and Community Development of the University of the Philippines. She is a professor of the College of Social Work and Community Development, Department of Women and Development Studies. She led the UP-CWS project, Watch Out When Women Vote, which aims to strengthen capacities and linkages of civil society groups and academe-based institutions to promote gender-sensitive, rights-based perspectives through citizens' electoral participation. Recent researches include Gender and Justice Action Research, Asia-wide research project on gender, citizenship, and information society, and one UP Health Benefits Action Research. She was appointed chair of the President's Committee to study and recommend the guidelines to implement the Magna Carta of Women in the University of the Philippines. She is the author of the book Rape, Love, and Sexuality, The Construction of Woman in Discourse, UP Press 2002, and part of the editorial board of Law and Society Journal, University of the Philippines College of Law. Dr. Claudio was also co-founder and now chair of the board of directors of Likhaan, an organization working with grassroots women on issues of reproductive and sexual and rights. She was also the chair of the board of the Women's Global Network for Reproductive Rights with offices in Manila and Amsterdam. Dr. Claudio is a doctor of medicine who holds a PhD in psychology. She is a graduate of the UP College of Medicine and earned her PhD in Philippine psychology from UP Diliman. She also did a postgraduate research fellowship at the University of Amsterdam in 1990. For the past 30 years, Dr. Claudio has been giving counseling services to women and LGBT survivors of violence. Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen to Dr. Sylvia Estrada Claudio.
Yes, I hope I can be heard clearly. Thank you, Ms. Lina Putgarda, for your very kind introduction. I believe you can now see my PowerPoint. Of course, before I begin, I would like to thank also the three organizations and their heads who are hosting us today. That would be, of course, National Council of Women in the Philippines, headed by its President Tess Gonzalez, the Young Women's Christian Association, headed by Ms. Lilia Farinas, and of course, as an academic, always a pleasure to reach across to another university, PWU, headed by its president, Mario Alfredo Benitez. I cannot mention any more of our dignitaries here. Of course, I need to mention PCW Chair Sandy Montaño, but other than Ma'am Sandy, I think I will just say hello to all the other dignitaries who are watching today. This is an August group of women, and so I'm very honored to be with you. Without further ado, when I looked at the draft program sent to me, admittedly some time ago, this was the topic that was assigned to me, and masunurin naman po ako. I will discuss violence against women, and I think the topic is quite right because I don't think this is an audience that needs to be convinced that violence is occurring, that it's occurring at alarming rates, that this has been proven by many studies. But some people still continue to ask, why does it happen? No? That is really more, what are the cultural issues involved? My next slide would be just a very quick definition, and I think everyone knows that this is our definition from the United Nations. Any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental health, harm, or suffering to women, including threats such as acts of coercion, arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. Very important in terms of our Safe Spaces Act, which we have now strengthened the idea that this happens very much in public life. And I just like to put this because if you will look at it, these are all very much different types of violence against women. And my experience in this field is I would run out of time if I were to really state to you the various forms of violence. And I can tell you of a story that makes clear to me why On the one hand, it's very important to talk about harassment, catcalling, violence that occurs to women in public spaces, which is a little bit what is being strengthened by our Safe Spaces Act. I would agree with one of our speakers, salamat po, Senator Risa Ontiveros. But one of my earliest experiences was that I was teaching this on violence against women in Inertia in Saints Co, a group of young people who were going to volunteer to do a lot of work in rape crisis centers, etc. And one of our students came rushing up after lunch, during lunch, and said, I just saw a man kick another woman in the belly outside on the street. So it was interesting. We rushed and we looked for them. We had to run down several blocks. Obviously, I was a little younger, so I could run quickly down several blocks. And we found them. And to make a long story short, because I know I should not take too much of your time and leave space for questions. They were homeless people. So this was not happening in the privacy of a home. This was happening in the streets because they did not have a home. He was actually hurting her in public space. I am happy again that I am assigned this discussion and that you do allow me to take a broader view of the types of violence. And if you will look at some of these that I put, quite a lot of different types. And as I said, it is, I would add so much more here, including, I think if you would, hate crimes will include violence against LGBTIA people, lesbophobia and homophobia is there, of course. Very quickly, just to give you the facts and figures. And as I said, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this because do stop me if I'm scrolling too fast. But I would like to go very much into bakit nangyayari? Ano po ba ang kultura? And my approach to this will be the common myths that we hear about some forms of violence because it exposes to us how we look at gender relations in the Philippines and what is very deeply wrong with that kind of look. No? Now, I will not have a beautiful discussion about how we look at culture. I think the anthropologists will kill me if I try to do that in 5 minutes. But let me just say that this is not everybody's culture. On the other hand, it is so much a part of our culture in the sense that it still happens and that it is still one of the reasons why these forms of violence do happen and while the majority of victims are women, the majority of perpetrators are men. And I hope we find some time to talk about men victims and because that is a very important problem too. Okay. So the first thing is rape is not a big deal. It's only sex. You'll hear this a lot from the perpetrators in my counseling. That's a lot of what they say. I remember a story of a man who had been featured in a media report because he had raped all 6 of his daughters. And when asked by the reporter why he would do such a thing, he said, produkto ko naman yung mga yan eh. At pag nagpakasal sila, makakatikim rin lang naman sila. Mabuti ako na ang mauna dahil ako ang may gawa sa kanila. So you can see that the concept of non-consent, which makes it rape, is very vague to this guy. And he thinks that it's just sex. So we know that rape in fact is a big deal. It's a crime. What is at the root of rape is not really just sexual, although we cannot deny the sexual component. It is actually about violence and control and dominance over the victim. I shall move on. Please do stop me if there's anything you would like to raise immediately, because these are very, I understand that sometimes these are very emotional things that I'm saying. No? So, another myth, rape only happens to teenagers or young women. That is not true. I think it comes from the idea that we have this bias about who is desirable sexually for men. And usually, our sexual criterion for desirability is very male centered and very much heterosexually male centered. That's what we call in our gender speak heterosexism. No? But the standards of sexuality and beauty and what is normal is usually not the standards that women would feel, because then how can rape only be sex if it is the standards of women who have to be heard on this issue? So the idea that rape only happens to women considered desirable by our culture, and this would be young women, of course, because we have a bias for the youth in our culture, is what is behind these myths. But if you look at the facts of the matter, all ages of women are attacked and become victims. And as I have said, men, boys, girls do become victims of rape. So it's more, again, looking at our culture and why our culture constructs it this way. The next myth on rape is it only happens when you ask for it. So women are provocative. Who are provocative are the only victims of rape. I think one of the examples that you might have been aware of is I am one of the founders, advisors, nakikialam, of a page called Bantay Bastos. So much in line with our forum as well today. And one of the big issues that a lot of people were taking up on social media started on this page of ours. Bantay Bastos is a page that is put up by a group of women I'm working with. It's called Every Woman. We are a coalition of organizations working on women's issues. But one of the things that really hit it off recently in our Facebook page was a advice given to various police stations about supposedly to women as to how to avoid rape. And one of those advice is not to wear sexy clothing. As you well know, sexy clothing is a matter of another person's taste. What may be offensive or sexy to one person or community may be quite okay in another community or subculture or person. But more than that, I always say, so you are offended, nahahalayan ka, tingin mo pangit yung suot ng tao, and that gives you an excuse to exchange bodily fluids. That is really a rather, what shall I say, ridiculous idea, unless our view of women is such that we do not consider them as full persons. They are always sort of the subject of a men's hatred or violence, so that if they offend on matters as human as difference of taste, the response can be extreme violence on the part of men. No? So when I'm talking to boys during sessions where we work with young men, I always say, if you find a woman offensive, please don't make her your friend or your intimate. Just leave her alone and go find someone who you are far more comfortable being with, because you like her dressing style, speaking style, whatever style you consider. No? So let's go. Another myth is that some women dream or fantasize about being raped. It is our sexual right to dream or fantasize about anything. And it may be true that some women do fantasize about this, but that is very different from reality and doing that. My own personal dream is that I will stay lying down in my bed for the next 6 months until the COVID goes away and eat anything I like while reading silly little novels that make me feel good. I'm not going to do that. And I cannot be judged by a silly, whatever is our fantasy, we do have a right to that. It's only when fantasy leaps over into reality that this becomes a problem for us, because that's when violence or human rights violations happen. But we have a right, according to our views of sexual rights, to whatever fantasy we wish to have. No. Okay. Ayan, a woman cannot be raped if she keeps her legs crossed or keeps moving. No man alone can rape a woman. Um, Attorney Claire and I have had a lot of grief, and probably more the attorneys, the lawyers, where the judges will often say bakit hindi ka lumaban? And it seems when you read through the court cases that many times the judge himself, or maybe the prosecutor, will make it appear that we should fight, or we should have bruises or scratches or some sort of harm to prove that we did not accept. Again, how much devalued are women in the sexual sphere or in life in general if a simple ayoko po is not sufficient to establish na ayaw. We also know psychologically that this also shows you that they would rather have us die protecting our honor, and think that is a better outcome than being passive, accepting the violence and surviving that violence. So how can a woman's life be less than her honor? And let me put it this let me say also that there is no dishonor in being the victim of violence. The dishonor here is the person who made that violence happen. In any case, the idea that sexual purity is part of our honor is yet another one of those cultural beliefs that actually is quite degrading for women, because physical and sexual purity cannot be the goals for anyone above virtue. And virtue is not a physical matter. So a full human being should actually be talking more about virtue of the self, of your morals, of your values, of the things you do. And honor and virtue cannot be attached to the physical aspect of anyone. But you will find that in many of these, the ways we justify and look at violence, it is very, very clear that again, women are lesser creatures, because it is to their physical and sexual purity or virginity that we seem to attach much more of their virtue than what they actually do. A joke of mine will be when someday a woman will announce she has discovered a cure for cancer and she's having a press con, somebody will say, but what was she wearing while she was announcing this event? So let me move on. I shouldn't take too long. Rapists are mostly psychotic men. You can identify a rapist by the way he looks. If this were true, my job would be very easy. The job of police people would be very easy, because we could just identify people and avoid them. The truth of the matter is that most men show no obvious signs of mental illness. In study after study, researchers are unable to find any significant psychological difference between men who rape and men who do not rape. So are men normally abnormal? Normally normal? Abnormally normal? My answer is there's nothing wrong with men per se. The culture is causing them, many men, to be essentially cruel and mean. If you teach in a culture that women are less, that they can be subject of violence, that their physical aspects are far more important, that consent is not the sine qua non of what is right in terms of physical and sexual relations, if that is what you teach men, then it is only a matter of statistics and fate and luck which men who will turn out wonderful and which men will turn out violent. At this point, I will tell you why I believe that feminism is not just a women's issue, it is also a men's issue. As the mother of 3 sons, I would not want my sons to be in any way the type of violent men that the culture sometimes allows them as an option. Uh, Myth, most rapes are spontaneous. A man sees a woman and has to have her. The fact is that most rapes are planned. A man may watch a particular woman for a while and try to learn her daily routine. Many men also test women's reactions to hostile or sexual remarks to see if they can intimidate them. Meron tayong kasabihan, pag hinainan daw ang tandang ng palay, di itutuka yan. No? I have two objections, and that's how they say that most rapes are spontaneous, or this is because women have evoked this violence. Hinainan mo ng palay yung tandang. Two things, women are not inanimate things like palay, they are not food. And the other thing is men are not stupid animals who have no capacity to control themselves. I expect a lot from my sons. I expect a lot from human beings. I expect a lot from men. I expect them to be decent. Okay, so thank you very much. I think I'm getting agitated here myself, so I will continue with it is impossible for a man to rape his wife. You know very well that this is already one of the victories of our laws, that before the law that was advocated for on rape, we did not, people actually thought that it is possible, that men could just have ways with their wife, despite the law that happens a lot still, that some men think it is their privilege to just have, because it's their wife, they need to be sexually serviced when they want, whenever they want, if they want. And that is still a problem we have to deal with regards to uh, this issue of consent within marriage. And I still think in our culture, you will find in some places that the rapist will marry the woman in order to extinguish her shame. And again, you have to think about the twisted logic of relationships and gender relationships. If the person who has violated you so badly is going to be your husband, and that erases the shame or his guilt, no? This talks about how sexual possession by a man becomes the sine qua non of one's honor. Sexual possession by a man who will marry you. And that really is, to my mind, quite difficult to understand, no? From a perspective of dignity of women and equality of women. Okay, rape only happens if you are out on the street late at night. Another idea. And then the facts just are not in line with this. It happens at all times of the day. And again, this tends to blame the victim. And this, I think, will very much coincide with our Safe Spaces Act, because violence against women as a whole constricts us from enjoying our freedoms and being out in the world as equal human beings. So one of the things I like that I'm sure you've heard of is there was this move by a women's group, I think somewhere in Latin America, and this was more to illustrate issues, not really as a serious move, that since it is men who are the victims of violence, since men who are the it is the men who are the victims of violence, uh, they should be the ones that should be given a curfew, and they cannot go out. I'm sorry, men who are the perpetrators of violence, they should be given a curfew and only be allowed out if the women are accompanying them. So if you put the shoe on the other foot, one would see that catcalling, the threat of rape if you go out, the threat of rape if you move too freely, or other forms of violence, is really telling to women, you are in a cage. You go against a certain level, a certain level of freedom, and that's it. You will get punished. So this is, I will just have a few more. I'll just take myths on domestic violence. I hope my approach to showing you these myths and discussing the silliness of it, what's behind this, what is the fact, is a helpful way of looking at culture in terms of domestic violence and why things happen, and perhaps why we should move to change the way we view gender relations in the Philippines. So on domestic violence, it only happens to lower class, poor, and uneducated people. This is a myth because gender relations extend from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich. If you ask us who have been counselors on these issues for very long, ang biruan po namin, kung maari po naming sabihin sa publiko kung sino ang nangre-rape ng asawa, ng rape ng kasambahay, ng rape ng ibang tao, kung sino nang bubugbog ng kanilang asawa, girlfriend, mga anak, babagsak po ang alta sayedad ng Pilipinas ng mabilis. Of course, it happens also in poor households. But that is also sometimes one of our problems, if you don't mind my saying this, because as professionals, we are bound by confidentiality. And yet that protects very many times the victimizers, because we know who they are. And sometimes we could say, pwede ba wag niyong iboto yan? Naku, grabe pag binoto niyo yan. You know, we know these things. And sorry po, I still won't tell you who they are kahit nang iintriga na po ako sa inyo. Okay, battering is caused by alcohol and drug abuse. Those are the real problems. Violence is just a byproduct. This is not true. Not all alcoholics beat up their women or become wives or become violent. At baliktad po, ang sinasabi sa akin ng aking mga pasyente, kapag mabigat na po ang kamay niya, gusto niya ng manakit, iinom na siya para mawala na lahat ng inhibitions niya para bugbugin niya na ako. So it is more the other way around. And again, it is because women, we teach men to be violent in this way. Okay, I will have only a few slides left. I assure our moderator that I am conscious of the time. It's only battering if someone is being physically abused. I think most of you know this. There are many forms of abuse, and my experience is that they often come together. It is very rare that I find a patient-client, a case where there's only one form of abuse. Battering is usually accomplished, physical abuse is usually accompanied by verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is accompanied by repeated infidelity. That is very brazen. That is usually very hurtful to the point of psychological and mental torture to the woman. Repeated infidelity can be coupled with extreme jealousy. Siya na nga yung palaging breaking of the sacredness of the marital vows. Pero very jealous siya. Ginagamot lang nung isang doktor yung kanilang anak. Aawayin pa niya yung doktor, making things very much worse, even for the child who's being treated by the doctor. Kasi kinausap ng doktor yung asawa. And of course, if you are a mother and you are talking to your doctors, the doctor of your child, you can be quite emotional. You can be comforted by a doctor if that's a good doctor. Pagseselosan na yun. Things like that can be quite often. And I can say that it's usually, in my experience, there are many times when it's 2 or 3 or 4. So verbal abuse coupled with economic abuse. She earns more money, but he makes sure he's the one that keeps it, gives her a small allowance, which is barely enough for her children and herself, and then uses the resources of the family to buy himself a sports car, women, gamble. These are the kinds of things that I experience and have been experiencing in the decades of my counseling with women. Most domestic violence reports just involve minor abuse, like a push or a slap. I don't like to tell you horror stories for my counseling, but let me tell you one. My earliest One of my earliest memories I cannot forget was a woman who her husband took a sumpit. Alam niyo po yung sumpit, this is a blowgun, and tried to use that blowgun on her genitalia. I am moving right along. Please stop your ears if this is very triggering to you or too violent. I do apologize if anyone is being triggered by my stories, but I do have to tell you also of the realities we face because of this culture of violence against women. Again, batterers are mentally ill. If they had the right medication or therapy, they'd stop battering and be fine. As someone who has tried initially to talk to batterers, help them change, do marital counseling, as someone who has talked to wives who have done everything they possibly could to change the man who is the father of their children, whom they love, very few who actually change. And again, it is like the men who rape, they pass psychological tests. And that is why I honestly believe it is a culture and not just a personality issue. A person. Okay. Batterers are unsuccessful and act resources to the world. As I said, same as rape. If we could just tell you who these lawyers, doctors, and diplomats are, perhaps we'd have a different set of leaders and perhaps better ones in this world of ours, not just sa Pilipinas, pero everywhere. Yon. This is the typical blame the victim. If we blame women for their dress and behavior, and that's why they're raped, we blame women naman for the domestic violence because they are naggers. The truth of the matter is, again, sabi nga nung aking pasyente, I remember pag naghahanap na ho yan ng dahilan, kahit anong dahilan, kami ay makakahanap yan. So yung isa, nagkamali lang siya ng pagplansya ng pilegis ng pantalon ng asawa niya, binugbog na siya. That was the reason. Yung isa naman, napansin ng asawa niya na ginamit, hinigaan niya yung unan, na yung sabi ng asawa niya, unan niya yon, ayun na. Yun na po ang dahilan kung bakit nagkabugbugan na. No? Batterers are violent in all their relationships, not true again. And I would caution all of you, this is why it can become quite divisive when we prosecute some cases of violence, whether it is under the rape law, the sexual harassment law, and now our safe spaces law. Kasi many colleagues and office mates and companions say, ang bait-bait nun. Hindi namin maisip. And because we don't like to think badly of the other person, and we know that person better, we think that the woman is lying or the victim is lying, not necessarily woman. But the truth of the matter is they can be quite violent to their families while seeming the nicest person to their office mates. Children need their father even if he is violent, a problem we have in therapy. The data shows that many children grow up better in non-violent environments, even if that means that you have to separate from the abusive husband. And then only heterosexual men batter. Our findings is that in gay and lesbian and gay relationships, you can have equal levels of violence, and I want to pay a little attention to this problem because very often there are some special issues involved here, but very often because it's a gay and lesbian relationship, we don't tend to be as sensitive and we tend to sweep the violence under the rug even more than when we're looking at heterosexual relationships. Last few slides po. Again, on cultural issues, most studies on gender-based violence show that perpetrators are exclusively men, women are at greater risk, physical abuse in intimate relationships is always accompanied by severe verbal and psychological abuse, and social institutions put in place to protect citizens often blame or ignore battered women. So if you look at what we can do, a wide range of studies show that the increased likelihood of a man beating his partner occurs at several levels. Again, at the individual level, this can include being in an abusive household or witnessing violence. So one has to be very, very careful when you counsel to keep the family together in a situation of violence. At the level of the family and relationships, cross-cultural studies have cited male control of wealth and decision-making within the family and marital conflict as strong predictors of abuse. At the community level, women's isolation and lack of social support, together with male peer groups that condone and legitimize men's violence, predict higher rates of violence. So we congratulate our women's groups for giving us social supports. At the societal level, studies around the world have found that violence against women is most common where gender roles are rigid, defined, and enforced, and where the concept of masculinity is linked to toughness, male honor, or dominance. Other cultural norms associated with abuse include tolerance of physical punishment of women and children, acceptance of violence as a means to settle interpersonal disputes, and the perception that men have ownership of women. So, I thought I think I will, with your permission, stop now, unless I suppose I need a cue. I'll stop now na po. I will stop now. As you can see, if there are any questions about how to set up a healthcare system or particular programs and principles, we can look at that together. But I am very conscious of the time I've taken for my slides, so I'll stop here at this point because I would think that if there's anything that is in my slides that's left over, and these are more like how to put up programs and what principles so that we can face the cultural factors that we have to deal with. I could discuss that a little more if the questions should arise. So I will stop my sharing here, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Claudio, for a very interesting and enlightening talk. Our third and last but not the least resource speaker, who will discuss the role of women civil society group in ensuring safe and secure spaces for women and girls, is currently the chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Women, the primary policy-making and coordinating body concerning women empowerment and gender equality. She is a registered nurse by profession. She is also the president and CEO of Community Health Education Emergency Rescue Services Corporation, or CHEERS, which provides trainings on emergency medical services conforming to the international standards on health and safety. Her awards and contributions are highly regarded, both in local and international arena. She is a former program coordinator of the Commission on Higher Education's National Service Training Program, and also sat as a member of the Curriculum Development Expert Panel on Disaster Preparedness of the Department of Education. She earned her diploma in Food Safety Management, focused on food technology and processing from the University of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Chairperson Sandra Sanchez Montano.
Hi, good afternoon po sa inyo lahat. I'm so happy and privileged to share the role of women, civil society group in ensuring safe and secure spaces for women and girls. Thank you so much, Comdet and Miss Mary, for inviting me to be one of your resource speaker. Okay, I'm so happy to address all the women and girls who are work with Zoom online meeting with us right now. Okay, can you please open the screen share? Okay, so I'll start off my talk without the hashtag Bawal Bastos law. Okay, our discussions this afternoon is about Republic Act 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act, the National Council for Women, okay, which is your organization and in partnership with the Philippine Commission on Women. Okay, next please. So what will be the outline of my presentation? Okay, background of the Safe Space Act. Paano po ba na buo itong Safe Space Act? Okay, the gender-based sexual harassment, okay, or the GBSH, qualified acts and penalties, the public space, the online workplace, educational and training institutions, and the oversight mechanism. This will be very short, so I hope I will not bore you on my presentation. Okay, next please. Republic Act 11313, full title is an act defining gender-based sexual harassment in streets, public space, online, workspaces, and educational or training institutions, providing protective measures and prescribing penalties thereof, or the Safe Space Act. The short title is Safe Space Act, signed April 17, 2019 last year and published July 19, 2019, and date of effectivity is August 13, 2019. Next. The gender-based sexual harassment in public space. Next. Okay. Acts which are committed through any unwanted and uninvited sexual actions or remarks against any person regardless of the motive or committing such actions or remarks. Okay, in public space refer to streets and alleys, public parks, schools, buildings, malls, bar, restaurant, transportation terminals, public market, space use evacuation centers, government office, public utility vehicles, private vehicles covered by app-based transport network service, okay, recreational area, club, resort, water parks, hotel, other areas regardless of ownership, openly accessible or offered to be accessed by the public. So these are the coverage of this public space. Okay, next. Okay, so ano yung sinasabi nila? Okay, anything that, you know, you feel na nakaka-demoralize. Oy, sexy, hi miss, ganda mo, sexy mo, wow, plunging neckline, mga ganon. So those are the remarks that you could receive in an area. Okay, next please. The act of GBSH in public spaces include catcalling or unwanted remarks directed towards person, commonly done in the form of wolf whistling, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist slurs, as well as unwanted invitations, persistent and uninvited comments or gestures of a person's appearance, relentless requests for personal details. Yung wala siyang ginawa kundi kulitin ka, kunin ko yung cellphone number mo, taga saan ka, kunin ko yung address mo. Okay, statements, sexual comments, and suggestions. Okay, next please. Public masturbation or flashing of private parts, grouping, making offensive body gestures, someone and other similar to sexual actions. Any advances, whether verbal or physical, that is unwanted and has threatened one's sense of personal space and physical safety. This may include cursing, leering, and intrusive gazing, and taunting. Persistent telling of sexual jokes, use of sexual names, and next, talking or conduct directed to a person involving the repeated visual or physical proximity, non-consensual communication, or a combination thereof that cause or will likely cause a person to fear for one's own safety or the safety of others, or to suffer emotional distress. Next. Who are the implementing bodies? Okay, the implementing bodies, of course, are the LG through the LGU, MMDA, and the Philippine National Police. So an ordinance that shall localize the applicability of the law within 60 days from its effectivity. Such an ordinance shall consider and address the particular circumstances prevalent in their respective jurisdiction. Next, please. Okay, so what are the verbal? Okay, first offense, 12 hours community service, inclusive of GST and 1,000 fine. Okay, demonstrated the first offense is 12 hours community service, which is 10,000 pesos and fine. And then the GBSH through stalking and physical advance first offense is imprisonment up to 11 to 30 days or fine of 30,000 provided that it includes attendance in community service inclusive of GST. So if you can see mga mahal kong kababaihan at mga women and girls, dapat malaman po natin tong Bawal Bastos Law or Safe Space Act dahil nandito po verbal, demonstrated or GBSH, magkano yung mga penalty po natin na makukuha. On the third offense, imprisonment up to 11 to 30 days and 10,000 fine. That is the verbal. But for the demonstrated, imprisonment up to 1 month and 1 to 9 months and 20,000 fine. And the third offense, imprisonment up to 4 months and 1 day to 6 months or 100,000 and fine. Next, please. Okay, so what are the penalties? Okay, cancellation of license or the driver by the LTO, suspension or revocation of the franchise by the LTFRB. Next. The gender-based online sexual harassment or the GBOSH. Next. Okay, DOH has tracked location of man who threatened Frankie Pangilinan. Okay, so this is the latest in the social media. So siguro lahat kayo aware of what happened on this time. Okay, next please. Gender-based online or GBOSH, okay, referred to act that use information and communications technology in terrorizing and intimidating victims through physical, psychological, and emotional threat, unwanted sexual, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist remarks and comments online, whether publicly or through direct and private messages. Invasion of the victim's privacy through cyber talking and incessant messaging. Okay, next, please. Okay, so uploading of and sharing without the consent of the victim any form of media that contains photo, video, or video with sexual content. Any unauthorized recording and sharing of any of the victim's photos, videos, or any information online impersonating identities of victims online or posting lies about victims or harm their reputation. Filing false abuse reports online platform to silence victims. Okay, if you are familiar, di ba meron kayong sariling wall and then may nag-comment, may nag-post na kung ano-anong mga masasamang sinasabi, plus nag-post ng mga pictures na ano. So kasama po yan sa GBOSH or gender-based online sexual harassment. Next, please. Okay, the imposable penalties for violation of the previously mentioned section is prison, correctional in its medium period, or a fine of not less than 100,000 but not more than 500,000. If the perpetrator is a judicial person, its license or franchise shall be automatically deemed revoked, and the person liable shall be the officers thereof, including the editor or reporter in the case of print media, and the station manager, editor, and broadcaster in the case of broadcast media. An alien who commits gender-based online sexual harassment shall be subject to deportation proceeding after serving sentence and payment of fines. So wag po kayong matatakot ngayon, kahit yan ay mga foreigners, meron po silang penalty at saka fines po sa kanilang gagawing basta pagbabastos sa ating mga kababaihan. Next, please. GBSH in streets, the act of taking place in PUB, including but not limited to jeepneys, taxi, tricycle, or app-based transport network vehicle services where the perpetrator is the driver of the vehicle and the offended party is a passenger. If the offended party is a minor, a senior citizen, or a person with disability, or a breastfeeding mother nursing her child. If the offended party is diagnosed with a mental condition tending to impair consent. If the perpetrator is a member of the uniformed service, such as the PNP and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and the act was perpetrated with the perpetrator was in uniform. Okay, next, please. Okay, gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace. Okay, next. Okay, so ito yung mga sinasabi nating mga indecent proposal. Ito yung mga kung gusto mong magkaroon ng higher position. Okay, ito yung mga sexual abuse na sinasabi sa ating mga kababaihan. Okay, next please. Okay, an act of or series of acts involving any unwelcome sexual advances, requests, or demand for sexual favors, or any act of sexual nature, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of the technology such as text messaging or electronic mail, or through any other forms of information and communication system that has or could have detrimental effect on the conditions of an individual's employment or education, job performance, or opportunities. Okay, next please. A conduct of sexual nature and other conduct based on sex affecting the dignity of a person which is unwelcome, unreasonable, and offensive of the recipient, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of technologies such as text messaging or electronic mail, or through any other forms of information and communication system. A conduct that is unwelcome, unpervasive, and creates an intimidating, hostile, or humiliating environment for the recipient. Next, please. So what are the duties of the employers? Disseminate the law to all persons in the workplace or post a copy of the law in a conspicuous place. Provide measure to prevent GBSH in the workplace, such as the conduct of anti-sexual harassment seminars. Create a code, provide or disseminate a code of conduct workplace policy which shall expressly reiterate the prohibition of GBSH, describe the procedures of the internal mechanism, set administrative policies. Okay, next please, penalties. Adequately represent the management, the employees from the supervisory rank, the rank and file employees, and the union if any. Designate a woman as its head, and not less than half of its members should be women. Be composed of members who should be impartial and not connected or related to the alleged perpetrator. Investigate and decide on the complaints within 10 days or less upon receipt thereof. Observe due process. Protect the complainant from retaliation. Guarantee confidentially to the greatest extent possible. Penalties. Employers who fail to implement these duties not less than 5,000 but not more than 10,000, or do not take action on reported acts of GBSH in the workplace not less than 10,000 but not more than 15,000, shall be fined accordingly. Next, please. The implementing bodies, of course, will be the Department of Labor, Employment, and the Civil Service Commission. Next, please. Gender-based sexual harassment in education and training institution. Ito yung mga CHED, TESDA, DepEd, and other training institutions. Next. GBSH may be committed by principals, school heads, teachers, instructors, professors, coaches, trainers, or any person who has authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another students and trainees. Next, please. Designate an OIC to receive complaints regarding violations of the law and forward them to the CODI. Impose administrative disciplinary measures for students who commit acts of GBSH against their fellow students or teachers. Take immediate action to eliminate acts of GBSH, prevent their recurrence, and address their effects. Educate students from the elementary to tertiary level about the provisions of the law and how they can report cases of GBSH committed against them. Next, please. The penalties is failure to implement duties specified in the act, in the law, and act on reported act of GBSH committed in the educational institution shall be penalized with a fine of not less than 10,000 pesos or not more than 15,000 pesos. Next. The implementing bodies, of course, is the DepEd, the CHED, and the TESDA. The oversight mechanism is the Philippine Commission on Women, the Department of Interior and Local Government, and the Department of Information and Communications Technology shall be the co-chair with the following as members. Okay, so you can see the following members of this oversight mechanism. Next, please. Okay, so I hope the presentation of the Bawal Bastos law or the Safe Space Act was very clear to you. I am sharing to you the presentation, and at the same time, gawin po nating Biblia sa atin. This will be our protection kahit kayo ay naglakad ng gabi, katulad nga po kanina ng binanggit po ng ating speaker na hindi po natin kasalanan kung halimbawa ay maigsi yung damit natin. Ang noon is that we really have to see to it that we understand the law. And again, from behalf of my office from the Philippine Commission on Women, I'm your chairperson, Sandy Montano, saying that we really have to take care of ourselves because, you know, there are so many perpetrators, there are so many people out there. So what we can say is we have the law, but we have to take care of ourselves also. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon.
Maraming salamat, Commissioner Montano. Oh my gosh, hindi ba kayo kinakabog? Ang dibdib ko kinakabog na. So I hope all those talks have lit a fire under all of you. And we've listened to such inspiring and riveting words from our speakers. I'm sure there are many thoughts going through your mind, many questions. So we shall open the floor for questions now. Now we are told that there have been some questions that have come in earlier in the program. So we will start with those questions. And I will turn over now to our moderator for the open forum, Attorney Alice Vidal, National Treasurer of NCWP. She will be assisted by Neri Liana. Take it away, Alice.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure after hearing our respective speakers, our esteemed speakers, we have a much deeper understanding of RA 11313, the Safe Spaces Act, and we feel empowered knowing the myths and the facts on the culture of violence of women. Now, first, I would like to remind you that we have a chat box for the question for those in the Zoom. And then on those on the FB Live, please feel free to type your questions in the comment box. Okay, and we will ask these questions to our panel of speakers. Our first question is for Director Claudio from sparksfly@gmail.com. Is Dr. Claudio around? The question is for you, Dr.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, why do you think it is always the women whom to blame every time she experienced catcalling or wolf whistling and or lewd remarks? This is from sparksfly@gmail.com.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to our new moderator also, Attorney Vidal. As I tried to explain, actually, this was also my dissertation. How do we look at the sexuality of men as opposed to the sexuality of women? No? I studied newspaper articles, several documents, cultural documents in my dissertation. This was a long time ago. But what it comes out with is that men's sexuality is, as I explained earlier, the way they are told about their sexuality is that they are easily provoked, that they are not quite responsible for controlling their sexuality, that there seems some overwhelming urge on their part. And the way naman women's sexuality is told to us is in very conservative families, cultures, communities, that we're not even supposed to admit that we are sexual creatures. This would make us mahalay, ang term siguro sa Tagalog, o malibog, and that those are not acceptable sort of traits for women. No? So if you put those two together, it puts a horrible burden on women not to provoke men's sexuality. And it essentially excuses men from controlling that sexuality. So one of the things that we teach men, and what we mean by teach is this can be a program from very, very young preschool where we teach certain attitudes of respect and nonviolence, to a set of standards that my organization, my NGO Likhaan, submitted for K-10, set of standards and educational objectives for each grade. to fulfill the requirements of the Responsible Parenthood Act for sex education in the K-10 curriculum. What we have tried to teach actually is that all of us have a responsibility towards mature, healthy sexuality. Sexuality is healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. But each one of us has sexual and reproductive rights. What that means, though, is that we need to be able to respect the sexual and reproductive rights of all through our actions, through our responsible actions. So it's not a matter of just saying, I have rights, I want to do this, which is fine because you do have rights and you can do that. But it also is a matter of saying, but the other person also has rights. And it is in the collective respect of each other's rights that we will be able to achieve a safe, healthy, and satisfying sexual life. So thank you to that question.
Director Claudio, Dr. Claudio, from DepEd, I have a colleague who always does green jokes. How would I know that he is not harassing me or us women in the group?
If it makes you uncomfortable, even if it's just you, but certainly if it makes your group uncomfortable, then that is in fact falls under the part of the law. Our current MC is an attorney, so I am happy to say this, and she will just correct me if I'm wrong. But that falls under the law of creating a hostile work environment.
That's right.
And that's exactly where you have a case, and you should then now report it to the committee that your office should have on that. Now, if kung wala pa kayong committee, you report to your superior. And again, attorney, di ba? If the superior does not act on this, the superior becomes equally liable for not acting on your complaint. I have one more thing to say to you before we let attorney ask the next question. We are here for you. You just tell President Tess or the other women here if you need help, because you and your office mates may need support from women's organizations. And that's what, for example, NC, the National Commission on National Council of Women in the Philippines, that's part of its job, to be able to give you the kind of support, moral, legal, whatever, that would be helpful. Not that I'm being pessimistic. Increasingly, government offices, even private offices, are learning. But you may be in a situation where, to be very frank, hindi pa nila nababalitaan yung law kahit 20 plus years na yung law, and you may need our support. But whether you are in a good environment or not, please reach out to women's groups if you do need help.
Thank you, thank you. Now, another question, pero I think na-answer na rin to from LGU, Calabarzon. What if ang victim or binabastos po ng lalaki ay member ng LGBTQ, particularly gay men? Ano pong pwedeng gawin? I think it's the same. Kung anong sa men or sa women, the same po ang process. I-report nyo rin po yan. Kahit na po ano yung ano ang gender, the same po ang ating dapat gawin na i-report po natin kung sa school, i-report po natin sa teacher, sa principal, kung sa office, meron na po dapat, according to the law, dapat po ay meron ng system on how to deal with this problem. So, dapat po ay wag po tayong matakot maski po LGBTQ ang binastos, kahit po babae, kahit lalaki, ay pareho rin ang recourse under the law. So another question, siguro, tapos na. Okay na tong sa akin. I would like to go to Neri. Neri, it's your turn to read the questions from our participants in the Zoom room. And
Thank you, Attorney. Thank you, Attorney. Sa Zoom po natin, we have a question here from Christine Eunice Ferrer. What can you do to protect the women or the victim and to encourage them to file a complaint since there are so many unreported cases due to discouraging factors that deter them to complain?
I would like to share also our experience in University of the Philippines, because we have one of the oldest sexual harassment codes sa Pilipinas, and certainly kung maaring magyabang, tingin ko naman may karapatan. We are the first, the landmark, the pioneer, still the leading university in terms of this issue. Hindi naman sa malayo yung iba, pero una po talaga kami, and we have such a long experience. So first of all, if you have to have the procedures in place. So the law itself prescribes, and we have followed the law and found it to be helpful, that everyone, so that would include, for example, sa freshie assemblies namin, ay meron kaming orientations on the code. For all sectors of our university, meron kaming continuing orientations on the codes. Even for new administrators, there is an offer that if they would like to brush up on the code. So general education on the code itself is helpful. We also have many classes for encouraged by our anti-sexual harassment office on the issues I talked about, which are not always related particularly to the code, but what we call the culture, gender relations that allows for violence against women. So we have fora on that. And then what is also clearly disseminated are the procedures and processes that the university at the highest level of the Board of Regents has already codified in order for you to be able to file a complaint. Once the victim files a complaint, marami hong proseso yan. Para maiksi lang ang sagot, we assign them if they would like to a counselor. So there is counseling and support for the victim of violence. And that is a luxury we would want to be able to afford, which is why earlier I told one of the women, if you cannot find a counselor, you need to find support anyway in a woman's group, a woman's group that you know of, the women's group who are here, and quite a number are here who you might want to come to, kasi minsan hindi naman malalim na psychological counseling ang kailangan. Kung kailangan man yon, they can help you find those resources. Pero minsan all you need is someone to make you feel a little stronger that you're not alone. So those are some of the first steps. The lawyers have to be very sensitive about the law. They have to have a gender-sensitive perspective. But those are the steps that you need to have in order to file a complaint. Last word lang po, I understand this is very, very difficult because sexual harassment and other forms of violence usually happen to someone who is very much less in power to the person who is doing the harassment. So it's not just because lalaki siya, babae ka, which in our society already puts people at a disadvantage. I have, in my experience, seen very high government officials take advantage of very low-level, newly hired, SG, below SG 16 sorts of situations. So nonetheless, having recognized how difficult it is, I have also seen such women struggle, put forward a case, and often enough and increasingly often win that case.
Thank you. Next question, Neri.
Sa sumpa din po, but medyo ano to, kasi DILG ang ano niya. From Raquel Mendoza, DFA po, from DFA. Can you share to us how DILG, MMD, APNP do to increase public awareness after a year of effectivity of RA 11313?
Naku. Dapat si Commissioner Sandy po yata yun. Ang hirap pong sumagot. Ang alam ko lang po, in terms of working with government, kasi kahit gobyerno po rin po ako sa UP, alam niyo po naman kaming taga-UP, doble cara kung gusto niyo ng hindi masyadong magandang salita. We have the face of a government institution, but also the face of a social critic, because that is our role, no? As a university, as academics, we have to be critical all the time. So I keep explaining this sometimes to our people and to my colleagues in government, no? Kung yung military dapat wala silang opinion, sa UP, binabayaran po kami para magka-opinion. At madalas ay importante ho na yung opinion namin ay pasaway, hindi po ba? Okay. So working for as a resource for government, we do reach out to DILG and to police. When I was still director of the center, there is some confusion po because I'm now Dean of College of Social Work and Community Development. I used to be director of the Center for Women's Studies of UP. It's two different institutions. When I was director, we always had trainings with the police to sensitize the police as well. Kasi alam nyo rin po, ang police natin, while we're happy to see an increasing number of women in the police, as President Tess Gonzalez said, we're slipping in terms of the leadership of women in our government institutions. And I would really like to see more female police generals nowadays, no? Come into power also. Because our police constantly needs, how do you say, tanggalan ng pagkamacho? Our police constantly needs this. I find that working with women police is easier, and giving them support to influence their colleagues is better. That is true also in DILG, where we need to empower your gender your gender focal points in order for that to work in the office. And maybe I understand a little the question of the person from DILG, kasi ang trabaho natin sa gobyerno parang walang katapusan, kasi tuwing may bagong dumating na employee o tuwing magbago ang leadership ng ating office, ng ating departamento, ay ayan na naman. Paulit na naman natin kailangang paliwanagan ng hindi lang yung law, pero yung mga malalalim na issue that makes the leadership more equitable, more inclusive, and more sensitive.
Yes po. May isa pa po for Director Claudio po. From Desril May Dupra. Good afternoon, ma'am. You said on your presentation earlier that rapists doesn't have any mental illness on why they did such bad things. But is there psychological disorder can be called to those people who's doing this thing? Thank you po.
Sa rapist.
Ang hirap po ng sagot na yan, no? Kasi parang ang hirap naman paniwalaan na walang sakit tong mga ganyan ang asal nila. I think the point that I was trying to make, kasi kung ang kultura natin ay binibigyang pagkonsinte ang violence against women, para sa iba pong marami po siguro sa atin, sa kanila normal lang na gawain yun. Kasi hindi naman sarili lang nilang kaisipan yun. Kaisipan ho ng lipunan natin. And that's why they do tend to pass, unfortunately for us, psychological tests. No? But if you ask me personally as a psychologist, would that say that these people are mentally healthy? My opinion would of course be that no, they are not mentally healthy people.
Neri?
Last po ito sa Zoom. From Richard Lawan, what would be the responsibility of CODI in the case where one of our employees in PAGCOR was harassed by the employee of a licensed casino? In this case, the victim is our employee and the perpetrator is not, though they belong to a licensing company that we regulate.
I just answered that one. Kasi the same din naman whether co-employee mo o hindi, dapat investigahan at mag-file ng appropriate case. If not office-based yung nangyari, so you can file a criminal case. because this can be covered by kung ano yung ginawa sa kanya, kasi sexual harassment hindi siya under the sexual harassment law kasi kung hindi niya boss yon, but it can be under this new law. So the thing is, report it, file the necessary report, and then the CODI should do something about it, and should nakalagay sa law na if they will not do something about it, pati sila makakasuhan. So I think ituloy niya po yung pagrereklamo, and definitely if she needs help, I can help. The Women Lawyers Association of the Philippines can help the person to file the necessary case or complaint, and we will push through with it, especially if the one that is being complained is a foreigner. Kasi usually foreigner yung mga yan, nasa PAGCOR. So just contact us. I'll help you if you need any help to pursue the complaint. Thank you.
Okay, and last question po, pero galing sa FB Live ng NCWP. In fact, may mga good wishes po from PWU FB Live din po. Ito po, siguro ito na yung last question natin. 4 ang tanong niya. From Shawar Rivera. Ano po definition ng gender-based sexual harassment, GBSH? And ano po ang difference nito sa gender-based harassment? What is the rationale in using gender-based sexual harassment? Next is when RA 7877 can be used. And last is if the term GBSH can now be used in formal documents of report. Thank you.
Gender-based. Ano yung una niyang tanong? Gender-based sexual harassment. Yung gender-based sexual harassment, it means based on dahil babae ka, dahil bakla ka, dahil sa gender mo, kaya mo na feel yung harassment. Hindi dahil iba ito sa sa sexual harassment law. Yung sexual harassment law, it's different because dapat ito on workplace, dapat boss and employee, teacher and estudyante. So yun lang, and amo or coach or trainee, yun ang sexual harassment law. So this new law, itong Safe Spaces Act, it expanded more than that. So nagkaroon tayo ng any gender-based. Sinipulan ka, bawal ang bastos, di ba? Sinipulan ka, kinurot ka, nasa LRT ka, dinikit-dikit yung ano niya, private part niya. Ito yung nandito sa Safe Spaces Act, meaning yung personal space mo na invade. Kaya Safe Spaces Act, kasi yung personal space mo na invade ng isang tao na may sexual orientation. Ibig sabihin kung lalaki, yung lalaking yung medyo gay, kiniskisan yung lalaki naman, so yun. So kung babae, ganun din na yung breast, yun ang kaibahan ng sexual harassment. Kasi sa sexual harassment, kailangan may moral ascendancy. Pag walang moral ascendancy, walang sexual harassment. So kulang yung law. So ito, this law fills the void between the sexual harassment and the Safe Spaces Act. So ito mas maganda kasi maski saan, sa jeep, sa bus, sa alley, ito ay pwede kang mag-file under this law. Ano pa yung tanong niya?
Yun na po. If the term GBSH can now be used in formal documents of pag magre-report po.
Sa tingin ko hindi. Kailangan you have to not that you have to do it. You have to put it in the context of this, under this law, but not outside this law. I don't think you can use that anywhere. Baka hindi kayo magkaintindihan, iba yung meaning para sa akin.
Okay na po. That is our 10th question, no? Pero may isa pa from Jovi Rose Carasalan. Can a victim still file a complaint 10 years after the incident?
Depende. Sinabi nga ni Attorney Padilla kanina, yung may mga hawak-hawak, walang what do you call that? Walang prescription. Pag may hawak, may hipo, wala raw prescription. Yun, under this law. Pero most of it, 10 years, 5 years. So kung siguro ay yung grabe, di ba sinabi niya light offense, kung yung nakapakinig kanina, walang imprescriptible, which is, I think, may mag-question yan sa Supreme Court. Kasi imprescriptible, may ganun ba? Dapat may prescription, anything. Pero nasa law, wala eh. Section 11 ng law yan, walang prescription. Yung mga naghahawak-hawak sa tao.
Ganun. Okay po. Yung nagtatanong po kung makakahingi sila ng presentation ni Chairperson Sandy, ang sagot niya po, yes, we can share it to you. So we will share it sa email po ninyo, yung mga, pakilagay lang po yung email address niyo para we can share it to you. Pumayag po siya ma-share.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, Mary. Shall we we'll have to end our forum, open forum. I think we tried to answer as many questions as we could, but those of you who have additional questions, please just write into us. I think we will let you know our email address, and we will be happy to forward them to our speakers. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, today's forum, which seemed quite ambitious at the start, would not have been possible if not for the combined efforts and cooperation and support of many. Today, we'd like to show our deep gratitude to the many who have helped make today possible and their present spending of their precious time with us this afternoon. We would like to present some humble tokens and gifts and certificate of recognition for their exemplary and valuable involvement and contributions as resource speakers and guests this afternoon. So we have like to present an e-certificate, and yes, I think we will show it when we show the certificate first to Attorney Clara Rita Padilla. We would like to present the certificate for her exemplary contribution to us this afternoon. We also would like to present the certificate to Commissioner, to Dr. Sylvia Estrada Claudio, also for her precious time, knowing how busy she is. These are our gifts. We will be presenting them to you to be accompanied by a certificate of recognition. Thank you very much. And to Commissioner Sandra Montano also, with thanks and recognition also to the Philippine Women's University. That's the certificate of Attorney Padilla, Dr. Claudio, and Sandra Montano. We'd like to present also to the Philippine Women's University, YWCA, and for unselfishly giving their time to the project. Certificates of appreciation are presented to, well, I got one for myself too. Thank you very much. And then Attorney Vidal, Ms. Lina Huaco, Ms. Regis Bicomo.
Thank you.
Yes, very much. Thank you, Marisa. And for the efforts of the technical and marketing support from PWU, headed by Mr. Roberto Tomas. Robert, maraming salamat sa inyo. May Tuanyo, Lourdes Tuando, and the rest of your, there's your certificate, Attorney Padilla, Attorney Vidal. And for all your help of technical support, and Dr. Cecil D. Thank you also. We will hear you in a little while. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a most challenging 2020, and the coming months, maybe years, would be more trying and more difficult, but we shall face these with our heads held high, and we shall stand shoulder to shoulder. Now we would like to invoke the blessings of the Almighty. I ask everyone to please unmute your microphones, turn on your microphones, let us hear your voices, so that as we recite a prayer for peace and violence-free community, let us raise our voices. Let us be heard. Turn on your microphones and let us recite the prayer in unison.
Messenger.
We will show it on the screen. Let us hear your voices, please.
Prayer
for peace and violence free. All together, please.
Loving God,
Inspire us
To
to
inspire us
for all
love for all
and
persons,
concern for the well-being
concern
of all who
create.
give us today the strength and courage to transform the compassion of our hearts into acts of peace, mercy, and justice.
Forgive us
Loving God,
arrogance.
forgive us for the arrogance that leads to moral blindness,
for desires
for desires to retaliate
and
against
vengeance,
for willingness to sacrifice others and forms to renounce all
formless,
forms of violence,
allegations,
unfair allegations, intolerance, and injury.
give us the
Courage to resist the settling courage to resist the threatening postures, calls to arms,
all actions taken
to safeguard women, children, and all of humanity.
power us
For us, live out the merciful and generous persons we claim to be.
persons we claim to be.
Make us channels of your peace, women and men here with alacrity for justice in our world.
us is love.
All this in the name of Jesus,
In the name of
mercy and grace, show us His love,
grace.
mercy, and
Amen.
grace. Amen.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to close today's program, may we invite Dr. Cecil M.D., Vice President for Luzon, CWP, for her parting words. Dr. D, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we thank all our speakers, all those who participated in this afternoon's forum. We thank our host, our PWU president, and of course, especially all our guests who shared their expertise in today's forum. Thank you, everyone. And also those who participated in this FB Live, our NCWP, PWU, and YWCA. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Be safe, everyone. Thank you.
Dr. D, thank you very much for your closing remarks. Thank you for being here, and we'd like to thank everybody for being here this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, for the privilege of your time, we are grateful for spending your afternoon with us. Thank you, Dr. D. Thank you for your closing. And if you will allow me, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank on behalf of NCWP, YWCA, and PWU, we thank you for spending a few hours of your afternoon with us. I'm sure listening to all our speakers, we're all fired up now. We have to do something. It's something we need to do, and we owe it to the kababaihan. And despite all the seriousness in the afternoon, I think let's be positive and look forward. And to end the afternoon in a very light mood, I'd like if you will allow me a little levity. Those of you who love pizza, I think you can identify with this. And I'd like to share this with you. If you understand why pizza is made round, why it is packed in a square box, and why it is eaten in triangles, then you will understand women. Try to connect that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you this afternoon. It has been a very enlightening and very inspiring afternoon. We wish you a very pleasant and safe trip home. A very good afternoon to all. Thank you.
Pictorial po.
Please turn on your cameras. We would like a photo of everybody. Okay, Robert, take it away, Robert.